Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcon Squad. Sponsored by Gametime. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcon Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to the Falcon Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Falcons analyst Jarvis Davis, Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman, and senior Falcons reporter Tori McElhaney. The Falcon Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So do the roster cuts on defense and offense make sense to you? We'll discuss. And yes, it's time to talk 18 again. Woohoo! But uniforms, do you want to see in week one? Do you want to see these during the whole season? We'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about the NFL cut down that is looming. So the Falcons are working towards their 53-man roster to start the regular season and announced the release of 12 players this weekend. But let's go defense first. Jarvis, I'm going to give you the 6 names on the defensive side of the ball that were cut. And let's start with whether or not you, Tori, Aaron, whether you guys think that those were the right moves, starting with D lineman Morgan Fox, corner Lamar Jackson, inside linebackers Caleb Johnson and Nick Cuvitz, defensive end Ronnie Perkins and Josh Thompson. Again, were those the right moves?
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000%. And I think that, the one that has caught a lot of folks' attention is the one that, we talk about Morgan Fox and what he's been able to do and where he wasn't able to do. And I think it's more so not based off of what his production was or wasn't. I think it was more so what the young guys have done, meaning the Brandon Dorless of the world, the Zach Harrisons of the world, like especially when you have him kind of bumping down inside to on those nickel situations or at that defensive tackle spot. So I think when you talk about continuing to develop the guys that you brought in just last year, right? Not Zach Harrison, but Dorless specifically, and the type of camp that he had, I think it was more so, okay, this was initially, I thought this was a breaking in case of emergency type signing anyway. Like if these guys don't necessarily get to a space where they feel like they are where they're on track to be where they need to be in their second year, I think that, Morgan Fox would have been the guy that they probably would stick around. But when you have a guy like Dorless doing what he did and that type of training camp that he had, I feel like that was one of those things where he just said, okay, we can cut our losses. This is a low-end rotational guy in the first place. And I think that was ultimately what Terry came to the conclusion of. Tori, what about you? How do you feel about those? Is it Morgan Fox you thought that was the right move, or was there any other move that you felt like stood out to you?
Yeah, no, I agree with kind of what you're saying about the Morgan Fox of it all, because I also kind of felt like, okay, he was brought in as like this veteran presence, but you don't really need that any longer. And to your point, like what Zach Harrison and Brandon Dorless specifically were able to do during training camp and the preseason, like it made total sense to me that you kept seeing Morgan Fox fall farther and farther down. I honestly, once we got to the 3rd preseason game and he was still playing in the 4th quarter of that game, I was like, okay, writing feels a little bit on the wall with this. So ultimately, like I don't see, all of these make sense to me. Like looking at these defensive cuts, there's not one that I'm like, oh, like maybe not. No, all of them make sense. I think the writing was on the wall with pretty much all of them, Morgan Fox included. I think it's just like a sign of where the defense is going. And to me, it makes every move made a bunch of sense. And I really don't have like that much to add, because these were the moves that were supposed to be made. Like if you have guys like Zach Harrison, Brandon Dorless, Braylon Trice, like moving in the right direction, you don't need some of these other guys. You don't need a Ronnie Perkins. You don't need a Morgan Fox. Like you don't need these guys. So I think for me, that's ultimately where I landed with these like defensive cuts specifically.
Yeah. And Tori also makes a good point about all of the players that she just mentioned. These are players that Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris drafted, and they're investing in. They want to see how those guys' careers play out. And you're also talking about younger players, so you're able to see sort of a path you hope that will be a future and a productive future with the Falcons, as opposed to guys that maybe you put in for like plug and play opportunities. These are guys that, hey, you selected them in the draft. You really do want to invest in them and see them grow organically.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the whole Morgan Fox thing, he was brought in to kind of be a pass rusher. That's what he's been with the Chargers the last couple of years, which is a guy that was a plus pass rusher and not necessarily a guy that was a valuable run defender. And, that does have value if you need that type of push up the middle where you're trying to replace Grady Jarrett and you want to have that valuable interior presence. But as Jarvis and Tori have stated, as well as yourself, T, I think some of the improvements made from some of the young up-and-coming players like a Brandon Dorlers, like a Ruka Roro, Zach Harrison, and some of these other guys who have been flashing throughout the preseason when it comes to the pass rush. It just basically boils down to, particularly with Dorless, it's like we have an up-and-coming 24-year-old guy that we know can also be an impactful pass rusher if we can develop that. And, probably still needs to work on the run defense. But if we're trying to develop that, it makes more sense to bet on the 24-year-old up and comer than a Morgan Fox, who just didn't quite look like he was a guy that was poised to have the same level of production that he had been doing with the Chargers the last couple of years, which was consistently 3 to 5 sacks and 30 or more pressures. And it felt like, at least based off of what we saw in training camp and in the preseason, like maybe he wasn't that player anymore. And it made total sense for the Falcons, I think, to move on. Now, when it comes to the other defensive players that got cut, I think a lot of these guys are probably not necessarily guys that the Falcons are planning on trying to sneak through waivers and get on their practice squad. That's why the Falcons were willing to make these moves on Saturday as opposed to waiting till Tuesday's 4 p.m. deadline, because you basically cut all your guys then, and then hopefully all the other teams cut all their guys. And so that is going to allow some of these guys to maybe be overlooked off the waiver process, and that's going to allow you to land some of these guys on the practice squad. But, for me, when it comes to saying who's the right move, I'll have some strong opinions about, maybe some of the backup cornerbacks that the Falcons may wind up keeping on that initial 53-man roster, but we'll just sort of have to wait and see on Tuesday whether or not they make the quote-unquote right moves when it comes to that sort of thing. And if people don't know what I'm talking about, just go back and listen to the postcast Falcon Squad Show where we talked about some of these guys where it's like, should he be on this roster? But that is, we'll leave that in store for on Tuesday.
So JD, let's stay where Free is and talk about the surprises, at least what you've seen so far in those cuts on the defensive side of the ball. Any surprises that other players didn't land there? And do you kind of have your eye on like, okay, and we talked about this, as Free mentioned on the postcast, about those guys who might be like 50-50 and could go either way.
Yeah. The first guy that came to mind, I thought that Taryn on AtlantaFalcons.com wrote a really good article on Khalid Kareem. And I think that he's a guy that I feel they might try to pull a James Smith-Williams with, because I really like what I saw from him. Those who don't know, James Smith-Williams was an edge player. He was like that strong run plus defender in a base 3-4 outside linebacker, right? But they had him as a defensive lineman on the final 53. So when you think about it from that aspect, okay, we understand what you can do. He's really nice against the run, and he brings some pass rush capabilities to the table as well. So I think playing around with the numbers, he's going to be one of those guys, right? And it might end up being that he might get cut, but I think that the Falcons are going to try to figure out how to keep him, and treating him like they did James Smith-Williams last year might be the way to try to sneak him through, so to speak.
I think for me, it all goes back to, I think, like defensive line numbers. And when you do interior defensive linemen and edge rushers and you carry a lot of them, those numbers have to come from somewhere else. And I think that, and we can talk about this further as we are talking about like offensive decisions and everything like that, but I am fascinated and I'm very curious to see ultimately how many offensive linemen this team keeps on the initial 53-man roster and how that changes potentially what the numbers look like for defensive linemen, edge rushers, inside linebackers, like, and wide receivers, if we're kind of still on the same topic of conversation. Like,
Mhm.
I really do think that if the Falcons decide to go light for offensive linemen, it opens the door for them to keep other individuals, particularly defensive linemen, particularly edge rushers, like on this roster. And to me, it then allows the movement to practice squad and clearing waivers and all that kind of stuff, like, becomes almost a moot point, because you can carry them on 53 and then you can down the road, come up with a different plan. But to me, a lot of the decisions just ultimately getting to 53-man roster cutdowns actually hinges on everything that's going on with the offensive line and what the Falcons ultimately want to do there, more than it does any other position. And what happens there will ultimately dictate numbers everywhere else.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Tori raises a great point. It'll be interesting to see how many offensive linemen the Falcons carry, because I think a lot of people, when you look at various people's roster projections, going into training camp, I saw some people having as little as 7 offensive linemen and 8 offensive linemen. And last year, the Falcons carried 10 and 11 guys for most of the season. I've seen those sort of projections. And now you sit there and you wonder, with Storm Norton and Caleb McGarry going down for at least a while, do the Falcons just simply say, oh, okay, well, we were planning on carrying 10 and now we're just going to carry 8? Or do they bring in new bodies at that position and say, well, we still got to carry 10, or, whatever that number is. And then I think that does have ramifications elsewhere on the roster. I think the same conversation can be had on the defensive line. I've seen various roster projections like Tori's that, have the Falcons carrying like 13 D linemen and edge rushers. And it'll be interesting to sort of see if the Falcons do decide to carry that many players, because if you're carrying that many D linemen, that's taking away from other positions that you can carry other players at. And it's, I would love to see the Falcons try. I don't know if you'll activate 13 D linemen. So you might have like only 10 guys active on game day, but you have 3 guys stashed on your roster. And that also impacts sort of, well, we need to, it impacts how much depth you can have at other positions moving forward. So, some of this roster math that, all of us roster nerds, nerd out about every single year for, 1 week out of the year, is going to be fascinating to see how it all falls out.
Yeah. So wondering if you guys, going back to just looking at the 6 overall or even beyond, because we know that 12 have been released so far, so many more to come, but any head scratchers for you guys as far as who made that first round of 12? Like, wow, I didn't see that coming on the defensive side of the ball, or any head scratchers of, wonder, who's next in line for that?
Yeah, I think that cornerback position is going to be very interesting, because Lamar Jackson, I wasn't surprised at all that he got cut, but it was at one point during the game or a few points during the game, he was at the safety spot. So I think that when you think about, it kind of tells you like who all the safeties going to make the squad, and then it kind of tells you that the cornerback position is going to be very interesting, because you still have Clark Phillips, who has a rib, like whatever the injury that is. He has a rib. Yeah, we know he has a rib, but we don't know necessarily what's going on with that rib. So I think that when you have a guy like Clark Phillips, you have a guy like D. Alford that was playing pretty late in that game. So, and then of course we got Billy Bowman, who I feel like he has proved that he can be that guy. And then you got a guy like Natron Brooks, who did some inside work at that nickel spot too. This is going to be very interesting as to how they handle this, because do they carry an extra corner? Being that they're going to be a reduction in offensive linemen. And I think that, this is going to be a big time numbers game that I feel that Terry Fontenot is going to play. And I feel like the defense is going to benefit from it. Aubrey's going to be able to benefit from, this numbers game that they have to play right now, based off of who the guys they have on this roster.
And Tori, this is a little bit of projection, because right now it's still a little bit of kind of conjecture. But to Jarvis's point, let me reset the question a little bit in terms of what you've seen so far of the players that have been cut. Does that give you any intel or insight into not so much who's going to be starting, whether it's the secondary or any other place on defense, but maybe what that pecking order might be?
Yeah, I think the pecking order has been a bit obvious of late, especially kind of with this defensive group. I think Morgan Fox was really the only one that I was having a hard time penciling in, because it's like, okay, you go out and you sign him for a specific reason. You know, I thought that there would be something manifesting for him on the 53-man roster. So I guess like that was the only one in terms of the list that we're working off of. But overall, I'm not like super surprised. I think I said this at the top of the show. Like, I'm not really surprised at all by any of the guys who have been released already. The crux of the conversation has to do around kind of, again, it's some of these players who the Falcons drafted. It's the Clark Phillips, it's the D'Angelo Malones, and it's what they do with Troy Anderson. Like, it's all of these players that you have invested something in, that do you want to have them go through waivers? Like, and I think Clark Phillips is if we're talking about defense, Clark Phillips to me is the number one name that I don't know what they're going to do with, because ultimately we have not seen him. And while we have not seen him, there have been other players who have stepped up and also kind of shown some versatility. I mean, even someone like Mike Ford, like they had him playing all about the secondary throughout the last couple of weeks. And he is a big special teams asset for Marquise Williams. Like, can I say the same thing about Clark Phillips? At this point in time, I can't. So if I can't say that someone's adding a plethora of value, that makes it really difficult to like have a spot on the 53-man roster for them if I know that I can't carry another offensive lineman or another receiver or whoever the case may be. Like, that's the one piece that I'm just like concerned about. Well, but then also at the exact same time, if they don't carry that many offensive linemen, maybe you do, like, you don't worry about Clark Phillips. You know, you put him on the roster and you move forward. Like, but that's ultimately where I kind of am sitting with all of this. It's really complicated. It really is. This is the most complicated 53-man roster cut for this specific team that I have felt in a pretty long time.
Yeah. And Free, that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask the question that a couple of our audience members posed in the chat. They wanted to know what our thoughts were. And as we wrap up, because we're kind of running out of time for this seg, so Free, I'll ask you to wrap us up. Practice squad. Who do you see, if anyone, from this group as maybe coming back on the practice squad?
Well, Caleb Johnson was probably the one guy that I thought really had a legit shot at a practice squad spot, just because he's been an established veteran in his league and a special teams contributor. Because in a world where, say, a linebacker like Divine Diablo goes down for a week or two, and then the Falcons, whoever their backup linebackers are going to be, JD Bertrand, Josh Woods, etc., that guy gets promoted to basically playing a spot in the lineup on Sunday. Well, those guys' primary contributions to the team as depth linebackers is on special teams. And so, you get that conveyor belt where the special teams linebacker becomes a starter that Sunday. And so you need to promote somebody else to come in and play special teams to replace that player. And so to me, because Caleb Johnson had that special teams background, he was one of those guys that I sort of was planning on penciling in as a potential practice squad spot. But with the Falcons cutting him on Saturday, maybe that's potentially up in the air. But I think the other thing, because Caleb Johnson, I think, is a vested veteran, I don't think he has to go through waivers. So if the Falcons do want to bring him back for the practice squad, if he chooses not, basically what that means is he is a true free agent. So if he wants to sign with another team, he can immediately. And if he doesn't sign with a team over the next couple of days, that gives the Falcons the flexibility to potentially bring him back to the practice squad. So he's probably the one guy of this defensive group that I would circle as potentially an option for the practice squad.
Now, do the roster cuts on offense make sense to the crew? We'll talk about that when we take it under further review. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made this switch. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LOCKEDONNFL and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about advertising. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. So, guys, we talked a little bit about those roster cuts on the defensive side of the ball. 6 more made on the offensive side. So, Tori, when you look at those moves, O-lineman Matthew Cindric, QB Ben DiNucci, running back Elijah Dotson, tight end Nikola Kalanick, and wide receivers Jesse Matthews and Quincy Skinner Jr., were those the right moves?
Yeah, because I don't know, kind of like to the point of the players that you ultimately want on a practice squad, like a Nick Nash or, you know, a Chris Blair, like some of these guys who may not make your 6 or 7 receivers that you're going to carry. Like the closer you can get to the deadline, the closer you can get to like waivers when everybody else is also making cuts. I think sometimes it's easier just to sign them. Like these are all players that I ultimately like, not saying that the Falcons don't see a future with, because things change, and someone like a Jesse Matthews, I feel like, has kind of sneakily hung around a lot over the last year or so. So I don't say like it's the end of anything, but these are just kind of the players that I think all make sense. I think honestly, like, and I wrote about this on Saturday morning after the last final preseason game on Friday evening, that Elijah Dotson is someone I really enjoyed watching throughout this preseason. I think that he kind of had a good preseason, and I thought that he did some nice things and he ran really hard. So I would like to see kind of where things go with him. I hope he gets an opportunity elsewhere, because ultimately the Falcons do have some tough decisions to make at running back, specifically with Carlos Washington, in a similar vein of what we were talking about with Clark Phillips and having an injury and not seeing him, while someone like Nathan Carter has kind of established himself as that kind of third guy off the bench, first guy, you know, behind Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, and I think he's done well. So that running back piece is still kind of a TBD up in the air. So I think the Elijah Dotson release was one that I was like, oh, I thought maybe depending on how they decided to do things at the running back position, we could see him down the road. But kind of having seen that he's in this first wave of cuts, I'm like, okay, maybe there's another opportunity for him elsewhere.
Yeah. And I think that point, Tori, isn't lost on us. Just here thinking about the guys that made enough of an impression. And we talk about it all the time, right, Free? Those guys who may have made enough of an impression where you want to release them first so that they get that kind of opportunity somewhere else in the league.
Yeah, and I'm glad Dotson had a couple of nice runs in the fourth quarter of that preseason finale, because it was tough sledding for him running behind this offensive line for the first couple of games, where it's just like my man was not even being able to get to the line of scrimmage before he was getting hit on some of these runs. And so I'm just like, hey, he got some good tape out there in the fourth quarter. So I'm glad for him, if his future is not in Atlanta on the practice squad, that he at least can say, hey, hey, look what I did in the fourth quarter when the blocking was actually there for me in the preseason. But, I think when you look at a lot of these guys, going back to that whole pecking order situation, like I think all these guys showed some things. Ben DiNucci out here, launching bombs for the people, as he said.
For the people.
Yes, for the people.
An important distinction.
Right.
All these guys had a moment or two in the preseason, but it just ultimately, I think they were stacked behind guys that had more moments, right? I think Jesse Matthews and Quincy Skinner showed some promise at that wide receiver position, but as Tori said, like, Nick Nash had a great summer. Chris Blair had a great summer. Dylan Drummond was catching a lot of the passes going his way. And it's like at a certain point, when you're the 11th or 12th best wide receiver on a roster, like, the numbers game is not going to work in your favor. And that's no fault of those guys. It's just there were 10 plus guys that were better than them this summer. And so therefore they're kind of lost in the pecking order. But hopefully, they'll continue to get opportunities. I think that's really the case with all of these offensive players. They're probably not going to get opportunities here in Atlanta just because I think the Falcons feel like they have better internal options at some of these positions, not only for the roster, but potentially for the practice squad. But hopefully they showed enough in these 3 preseason games that maybe they'll be able to land an opportunity with another team that, didn't necessarily have as many good options in their training camp and preseason runs this summer.
Yeah. And Jarvis, for you, when you look on the offensive side of the ball and the decisions that were made to move on, what do you think about those decisions? Were they the right ones?
Oh yeah, I think they were, and I think that the running back piece is very interesting, like Tori brought up, because you have basically, like, as Bijan Robinson has stated, 1A and 1B at their running back, and then it was like, who else out there? Because I feel like Carlos Washington was a guy that he's had good camps. He's always been able to stick around for the Atlanta Falcons, and I think he's a good hard runner. And for him to finally really have a legitimate shot of being that third running back, and he just hasn't been healthy. Like, we've seen this movie before with Troy Anderson. Like, okay, we've seen the flashes, we've seen in regular season games, and understanding why you were brought in as a second round pick, even though you were kind of green when it comes to, the linebacker position. But like, the best ability is availability. Like, and it's truly unfortunate that Carlos Washington was able to do that. But here's the thing, here's the kicker about being in the NFL. If one guy isn't able to take advantage of an opportunity that's right in front of him, somebody will. And I feel like Nathan Carter has done that. Now, granted, rookie running back, pass protection, everybody struggles with that. We saw Bijan in his rookie year, and he's got tremendously better. It's almost like asset for him now. So yeah, that's the only thing I would say about Nathan Carter. But when you're talking about squeezing lemonade out of a word that I don't want to use right now behind that second offensive line, like, Nathan Carter was that. So yeah, I'm excited, and I truly get excited about stuff like that. So yeah, right moves for sure. And I really enjoy guys taking advantage of the opportunity that's in front of them.
Any head scratchers, Tori, whether it's who was a part of that list or who wasn't on the offensive side?
I mean, if we're sticking with the offensive line conversation, I think that
Yes.
the Falcons,
I have one.
like, it is a bit interesting. I don't know. I mean, ultimately, like, the head scratcher to me is not anyone on this list. Like, the head scratcher
on or off,
right?
Yep.
Like, it has to be off of the list, because the head scratchers to me, it's like, I don't know what the Falcons are going to do at offensive line. And I'm not just talking tackles. Like, I'm also talking backup center. Like, I think the conversation, what's so interesting, and I said this early on, like, after that very first preseason game, where I was like, hold up a minute. Like, we've been talking a lot about, okay, the only real problem the Falcons have at offensive line is, like, who backs up Ryan Newsel at center. Like, that's the only issue. I don't feel that way. I started to not feel that way very early on in the preseason, that it's like, no, if you're looking at the Falcons, you need to be looking at offensive depth in its entirety.
Yeah.
And I think, like, from where I sit right now, I was not impressed with the second team offensive line before the Caleb McGarry stuff happened, before the Storm Norton stuff happened, before we really started talking about Ryan Newsel taking over for Drew Dahlman full time. Like, now it is a completely different conversation. And yes, I think the argument can be made, like, okay, like, you don't ever see, like, a full second team offensive line all together in the regular season. I get that. You're putting in one for one, which, putting someone beside Chris Lindstrom is going to make them better, point blank, period. I get that. However, there are issues that need to be addressed, and I don't know right now what that is going to look like based on who we have seen over the course of the preseason. I don't have a lot of confidence right now in the depth of the position, but I don't know kind of what needs to happen in order for me to feel that way,
Yeah.
because I don't know who the Falcons are pinpointing. If they're pinpointing anyone right now on another 53 man or who could fall off of a 53 man, like there are too many balls in the air right now for me to feel confident about offensive line depth at all at any position.
Exactly. And Tori, you make a great point about how it's just been stacking. So we had that gaping hole between finding out Drew Dahlman was parting ways to go to the Bears and finding out that Ryan Newsome really and truly had that job, whether we thought he was the de facto or not. And then you go to that second level of Storm Norton gets dinged up. And then you go to the next level of Caleb McGarry might not see the football field for 2025, excuse me. And so as those things start stacking up, and then you get the notification Saturday that the Falcons announced that they placed Jake Hansen on IR. So I think to your point, Tori, it's the stacking up of everything coupled with what we saw on the field all 3 games of the preseason. And it's like, okay, you gotta be concerned. Your level of concern has to start getting higher and higher as all these things stack up. And Free, you kind of look at that and you say, that Hansen announcement being the most recent, how does that affect that O-line room that's already struggling, as Tori mentioned, with the depth because of all things that they consider? And you're looking like what the decisions that they made in terms of who's been cut, who might be cut, so on and so forth. But yeah, I think that's kind of an area that's looming even more so with the gray space than even what we saw on the defensive side.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up Jake Hansen. The Falcons brought him in a couple of weeks ago after that first preseason game to challenge Javon Gwynn, because that was kind of at that point the biggest question mark on the second string offensive line was the center position.
Mm-hmm.
With Jack Nelson struggling, like, okay, he's a rookie. That transition, that jump from the Big Ten to the NFL is a significant jump. But some of the other struggles from some of these other guys, particularly a guy like Javon Gwynn, who's been in this system for 3 years now, and you're like, you shouldn't be struggling with some of the, blown assignments in this game. And and you bring in Jake Hansen, who's been in this league for many years, has played center, has played guard. It's kind of like, okay, this is a very big shot across the bow. And now Jake Hansen goes down with that injury late against the Cowboys and is now on IR. And you're like, okay, are we kind of stuck with Javon Gwynn as our backup center? And does that have the Falcons scrambling for other options? Because, and I think I joked about this on a previous Falcon Squad postcast or whatever, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of a decade ago when Dan Quinn first comes into the building and the Falcons starting offensive line is struggling in the preseason, and they basically just overhaul that thing in the week before the season, where they trade or cut Joe Hawley, who was the presumptive starter at the center. James Stone had been playing all the preseason snaps at left guard. They trade for Andy Levitri. Ryan Schrader had a rough, preseason game against the Dolphins. And so they're like, okay, let's give Jake Long a call and see if we need to bring him in to sort of replace that. And like, that's not going to be the issue for the Falcons starters, but you kind of feel like, man, we could use 4 or 3 to 5 new faces on the second string offensive line. We need that type of overhaul. I don't think that's a particularly realistic thing that we'll see the Falcons do, but they're kind of in the same boat where it's just like, I don't know if any of these guys are really worth keeping on the roster. And if we can, scour the waiver wire, get some trades, bring in some free agents and just completely overhaul this second string offensive line, that I think would benefit the Falcons. But obviously, I'm not necessarily expecting them to do that. But like, that's kind of that's where we're kind of at with the, the depth on this offensive line, where it's just like, yeah, there's the 5 starters, and now that includes Elijah Wilkinson, and then everybody else is like, I don't know should you be here? Like, I don't know. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, I'm with Free. I think that they're going to scour that waiver wire for a backup center. They have to, because like some of the, I was talking about this when I watched the game live. We talked about this on the Falcon Squad post game, and going back and watching the tape again, I feel worse. I was like, this This is unacceptable. It's like basic stuff. Like everybody stepping the same way on the outside zone. Like, why are you hesitating? Why are you freezing when the ball is snapped? You're the center, and you have someone lined up directly over you, or a half shade. I give you that. He's half shade over you. You got to touch him at least. Like Mozzie Smith is hard to miss. Like you got to give him something because either one of your homeboys, Kyle Hinton or Joshua Gray, somebody's about to get their hands on him at some point. Because guess what? There's a potential lane. There's a cutback right there for you in the zone scheme because that's why there's no designated hole for you to go to. So it's just, you always got to be on point. And that happened several times during the game. Not on that particular play when Mozzie Smith got that TFL. It's just, so yeah, I feel like Terry is going to be calling around. He talking to his scouting department like, hey, what center's about to get cut? And he has to be a 3 to 4 year vet because I think Jake Hansen, once he got in, he just saw Elijah Dawson was able to break off those plays. And then as soon as Hansen went down and Jovan Gwynn was in that center, you saw how hard it was to run the football. It just, this is just easy math. It's easy math to me. So yeah, I don't think they're going to go into the season with Jovan Gwynn as their backup center. So yeah, just because we're talking about basic stuff. We're not talking about, oh, okay, I ain't like how you finished that block or you didn't finish that block how I necessarily wanted you to. We're talking about, why didn't you block that guy? That we can't be asking that question.
The kind of drop off you simply can't have
Absolutely.
when you get into the regular season at any position across that entire O-line. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So, well, it's time for us to talk about something we talked about, 277 times and counting on this show. But yeah, we're going to talk about it again when we come back. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. I mean, think about it. Bijan Robinson, that might not be a bad look. He is definitely on mission. Crown your champion in August. Like, what do you want to say about the Super Bowl this season? Who do you think is going to hoist the trophy, the Lombardi Trophy, next February? Or parlay your division winner dark horses. I don't think the Falcons are a dark horse, but maybe go over to the AFC in the South and you might find a dark horse over there. NFC South, not so much. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. So, Aaron, it's time for your favorite part of our show, the edition of Where in the World Will Kirko Go? And the reason I thought about it this time is because, of course, we heard Raiders backup QB Aiden O'Connell will miss 6 to 8 weeks because of a fractured right wrist he sustained in their preseason finale Saturday night. Now, we know Vegas has a QB1, that's Geno Smith, and we know that Kirk Cousins doesn't want to be a backup, wants to be traded to a contender. But think about this, just humor me, because we already knew the comments were going to come flying with questions for us about Kirk Cousins landing in Vegas. So here we go. If Geno falls back to earth and maybe he's mid with a team in the Raiders that some actually think on some level can shake up, not necessarily win, but shake up the AFC West, is there some viability for the Raiders to maybe be a trade partner for the Falcons?
Unfortunately, T, no. Basically, trading for Kirk Cousins in this hypothetical scenario where the Geno Smith, goes back to being Jets Geno as opposed to Seahawks Geno, right? Geno's going to turn 35 in October. The Raiders just gave him a contract that basically guarantees $60 million, $40 million this year and like $20 million next year. If Geno stinks, I don't think the Raiders are going to be like, you know what we need? We need an even older quarterback with just as much guaranteed money left on his, maybe not just as much, but still plenty of guaranteed money left on his contract. That's going to solve the problem. I think in this hypothetical where Geno turns back into Jets Geno,
Yes.
and IK Inikpali comes out of the crowd and punches him in the face and breaks his jaw. Again, I have to paint the picture of how this could go down, because to me, I don't think Geno's turning back into a pumpkin. But I think the Raiders are going to be like, okay, well, we're done with the old quarterback. We're just going to suck and get a young quarterback in next year's draft. I think that's the path they're going to go, as opposed to, you know what? We just didn't have the right old quarterback that might turn into a pumpkin that arguably already has turned into a, again, not my words. Those are the words of other people. I didn't say that. But, I don't think Kirk, I won't say reunion, but a Kirk union in Las Vegas is likely in the cards based off of those reasons.
So, Jarvis, it sounds like to me that despite Free loving Kirktober, he doesn't necessarily think the Kirktober show is going to land itself in Vegas. But like I said, had to ask the question because the question was going to be asked of us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a Cinderella slipper being put on Kirk Cousins' foot to get on the plane to go to Las Vegas. Was that kind of like in line with what you were talking about, Free?
Yeah.
But no. You see the line I tried to draw there? I think I messed it up. Of course, Yeah, and did. But seriously though, I don't think that if Kirk isn't on this roster, I don't think that will be the scenario in which it happens, right? Because I think it's going to be. I'm just going to use maybe Bo Nix as an example. You got a young quarterback, like you're on a rookie deal. You got some cap space, and he goes down for the season. And the expectations for the Broncos, hey, they're ascending, right? They're trying playoffs. Sean Payton, he ain't trying to lose. He'll need a tank for a quarterback, like Free mentioned with the Raiders. Like, if they suck, all right, cool. Ain't like we haven't sucked before. But now the Broncos, they got some expectations over there. So I think that if we're a scenario where Kirk kind of is not on this roster and the wonderful and illustrious Easton Stick steps into the backup role, that Free has been praying for. I saw the prayers last night, bro. I was peeking through your window. You know what I'm saying? So, but I think that y'all know me, man. Don't be laughing at me like that. So when you look at what Kirk brings to the table, I think it's going to be a young quarterback, a team with the expectations. Young quarterbacks means, hey, he's cheap right now, and he doesn't have an extension on his belt, because that's what it's going to take in order for anyone to say, hey, we want to win some games, but we know that we're going to take on some of that salary as well, because Terry is not. If you say, hey, you still got to pay the contract, no, Terry ain't trying to do that.
Not happening.
Yeah, I think that's honestly the crux. Like, just to kind of throw it out there, like, let's just say that Kirk continues to be the backup quarterback in Atlanta for all of 2025. I'm at the point now where it's like, I don't know if I'm kind of like, if I'm a betting woman, which I'm not allowed to. But the longer this thing goes, the more and more I'm like, maybe this whole thing, every conversation we ever had about Kirk Cousins, like, that we're going to get to February 2026 and Kirk Cousins is still on this roster. Like, I think we need to mentally and emotionally prepare for that, because I'm still under the working assumption that yes, as soon as a starting quarterback, to Jarvis's point, like a young quarterback, they have like a team, an organization has the money, they feel they're in dire straits, like call Kirk Cousins. I'm still holding on to that being an option, but the longer this thing goes, the more we talk about Kirk Cousins, the more that like things shake out amongst like the league, and knowing how expensive Kirk Cousins is, unless a team thinks that they're going to go to the playoffs with Kirk Cousins and they need someone in right then and there who can throw a 10-yard out route, like, maybe that call is made. Yeah. But we're to the point now where I'm a bit like, I'll believe it when I see it. And I'm going to continue to kind of work under the assumption that everything that Terry Fontenot and freaking Raheem Morris said back in January of 2025 that they feel comfortable about Kirk Cousins being the backup to Michael Penix.
Yeah.
Until something manifests, I am going to continue to work under that assumption that Kirk Cousins will be here until January or February 2026 as the backup quarterback to Michael Penix Jr.
It could happen. I mean,
that's where I'm at.
Right. Like you said, Tori, we got through the preseason, and really most of us thought that something could happen during the preseason. And that could be because of what we saw last season in what happened with JJ McCarthy. Just as an example, no offense in bringing up the person who replaced Kirk Cousins, but ultimately you're thinking, okay, that happened last year, that could happen again this year. Or you're looking back at the debacle from 2023, where a third of the teams in the league saw changes at QB, and one team in particular went through 5 QBs in one season due to injury. So yeah, you're kind of thinking of 23 and 24 as dictating what you think you're going to see in 25. But yep, you're right, Tori. We could be in this conversation in January talking about Kirk Cousins as the darn backup, who was the backup throughout the entirety of the 2025 season. So Free, that then takes me to your guy. And I know that you don't necessarily want to think about this, but when you start thinking about pieces, and if Kirko is indeed ensconced at QB2, then does that make Easton Stick the viable trade option for his performance in the preseason, just in case a team comes calling?
Well, if we're using the Raiders specific example, I do think Easton Stick makes more sense for the Raiders than Kirk Cousins does to replace Aiden O'Connell. So based off of that, yeah, sure. Easton Stick probably, if the Falcons are willing to shop him or at least answering phone calls about him, they will probably get more phone calls about Easton Stick in the next 48 hours than they will get about Kirk Cousins in the next 48 hours, but we'll see. And so I do feel like for that reason, it is a more likely possibility than a Kirk Cousins trade. But at the same time, I don't expect teams to be bending over backwards to sign Easton Stick, because teams had plenty of opportunities to sign Easton Stick this offseason, and they passed on those opportunities until the Falcons got, like, I can't remember the exact timeline, but it was like maybe a week before the draft, where the Falcons like, I guess we do have to kind of get another quarterback in here just in case a Kirk trade happens. And so they would sign Easton Stick, and there was basically him and Carson Wentz, and then Carson Wentz just signed with the Vikings. And so it's basically, unless a team is like, yeah, you know, we don't fool with Gardner Minshew, or, you know, a team has buyer's remorse over one of the veterans that they brought in this offseason, I don't expect anybody to be, you know, banging down the door to bring Easton Stick in. But I think at least for teams like the Raiders and others, right, like, there's going to be more opportunities for an Easton Stick to come in and be a backup somewhere than I think there's going to be opportunities for Kirk Cousins to go somewhere and be a starter at this point in time. But we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and just based off of what Easton Stick play, I just feel like he's earned a backup role, right? Like, so, and because of how he's been able to operate within his offense, and then the pass protection. You go back to the second offensive line again. That was a little bit better than the run blocking. So, and I think that, you know, Easton Stick also showed that he can operate within that more play action type thing. When we talk about Zach Robinson, and I know Free's been kind of championing that, leading that charge on having more play action in this offense, and because in order for it to be successful and get those more explosive plays down the field, when you have a quarterback that can execute that play action and that fake, and then get the ball down the field to whoever, whether it be Darnell Mooney. I don't know if we're gonna see him. You know, that's an interesting conversation too. Where is he gonna be? Or it'd be Casey Washington, you know, or Ray McLeod, like whoever. So I think that, you know, the evolution of this offense, I think Easton Stick was able to execute that. That's why I feel like he really earned the spot. So I think he will be. I'm with Aaron. Like, if we're talking about the phone calls that Terry Fontenot is going to receive, it's definitely going to be, hey, what's up with 12? You know, what y'all gonna do with him? You know, hey, we'll give you a 6th round pick. You know, I know you want to cut him. You know, you might not make it through waivers. You know, if you got a couple of teams that are out there looking for a solid backup.
I think I'm going to say the same thing about Easton Stick as I just said about Kirk Cousins. I think we all need to get in our brains and prepare mentally and emotionally that Easton Stick is a part of this roster until the end of 2025. And The reason why I say this, the reason why I say this is the exact reason why I said that you have this inkling in the back of your mind that something is going to be catastrophic somewhere and someone's going to call for Kirk Cousins. And if they call for Kirk Cousins, you can't be up a creek without a paddle in terms of not having a backup. So you stock Easton stick in the back and you kind of say, hey man, keep working. Hopefully we don't need you. And if the Falcons need Easton stick in 2025, something has blown up. Something has happened. Something is wrong. But I don't think that means that he will not be off of this roster. I think he's a true break glass in case of emergency. And that is where we will find ourselves in January 2026. If, he's still on this roster, but maybe you never see him. You're like, hey, remember that emergency third quarterback the Falcons had? Right. That stick guy? Didn't he perform well in the preseason? Yeah. Right. But I don't foresee. I think they'll carry three. I think they will carry Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins, Easton stick throughout 2025's entirety, unless again something somewhere catastrophic happens.
Yes.
The Browns carry four quarterbacks on the active roster, which is reportedly what's going to happen. The Falcons can definitely keep them.
Who's that? I'm sorry, say it again.
I'll say if the Browns can for some reason keep four quarterbacks on their
six.
roster.
I don't know if the Browns are the barometer of which
no. Yeah. Only by number, Tori. Definitely not by quality of decision. Yeah. Because they are
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. Thanks for saying it after I said it. Thank you.
but yeah, no, Tori, you're absolutely right. We all need to prepare that there may be three quarterbacks, except Aaron is the only one of us that doesn't have to prepare because this puts Aaron in his happy place. So I think he's good to go with if Easton stick is carried for the duration of the 2025 season. But we'll talk when we come back. We'll talk about another QB that the Falcons decided, hey, we might not necessarily want you. Thanks for your services, but he took it all in stride. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner, and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, building their championship squads. If you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy again, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league. Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete and brand new features that make the game even better. With season kickoff on September 4th, wow, can't believe that's almost here. Now's the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. Want more ways to play? You can try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. The NFL season kicks off again September 4th. So don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. All right, guys, let's have a little fun here. We've been talking about the QB room, and obviously we know Michael Penix Jr., solid QB1. Kirk Cousins, solid QB2. Easton stick, solid QB3, but the Falcons decided we're good right there. So they parted ways with Ben DiNucci, who they'd recently picked up. And of course, he tweeted when he was picked up by the Falcons, did the same with letting us know he got cut. He tweeted, quote, "Not many beers better than the airport. I just got cut from the NFL for the 7th time. Beer. Trust me, you wouldn't understand." So it's good to see that Ben DiNucci has taken that all in stride, Jarvis. But what would your move be if you got cut a 7th time?
Ooh, I don't know if I would make light of it like that because, it is lifelong dream, playing football for at least 10 years. You've been playing football for at least 10 years, right? Yeah. So when you think about it from that aspect of it, most of the time you start playing in your childhood. So it's a childhood dream. And then you realize you sign with the team and, I just think that's a little bit too sarcastic. That's too much sarcasm for me. I don't know if I would be handled like that. As a matter of fact, I would not handle it like that. So yeah, for me, it was just, I understand the comedic value of it, but I definitely wouldn't be doing that because I would find something else to joke about because childhood dreams not being realized. Yeah, that's kind of I try to deal with that on my own and not in the public on a cesspool that is called Twitter. I call it Twitter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you got to be so careful with Twitter because you never quite know where that's going to go. Like that could be rabbit hole material in a heartbeat because someone says one thing as you were trying to take it in stride. And Tori, you're trying to make sure you don't cry in your beer. So you make light of the fact that, hey, I was drafted in 2020. I was a 7th rounder. Woohoo. But also I'm now on my 7th team just 5 years later. And you're trying to make light of it. But I don't know. That still has to be kind of tough. And kind of messes with your mental after like the 7th time.
I mean, let's just play devil's advocate here. Let's say that Ben DiNucci, this is what he wanted. Like maybe he wanted that beer, like truly did he? Because seriously, when he's in the airport on the way to Atlanta, understanding the situation is what it is in Atlanta.
Sure.
Yeah.
The 4th string quarterback gets injured in the 4th quarter of a 2nd preseason game. They need someone to come in and take reps because they know that Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins is not going to play in the 3rd and final preseason game. Like, did he? I mean, honestly, he probably had that beer like ready, like on his way. Let's be real, like on his way to the Atlanta airport. Maybe he as he landed, he stopped to that restaurant was like, "Hey, like,
see you in a couple days.
Back. Yeah, I may be back here in like a week and a half. Like, so get that beer ready. Like, put it on tap. I am a person like." I really want this beer. Like, that'd be great. Like, I don't think it's like for someone like Ben DiNucci and understanding his own situation and kind of where he is, like, and the fact that also, let's be real, this man was on TikTok talking about like bowling, like before, like saying like, hey, still got a good arm. Like, like, so I think this is his brand. I don't think that it should be taken too terribly seriously. I think for some people, like, yes, this is the worst week of the NFL calendar year because to your point, dreams are being realized, dreams are being crushed, and guys don't know where their next paycheck is coming from. So I am incredibly sensitive to this time of year. But for someone like Ben DiNucci, this is just how he copes with it. And I'm not gonna yuck someone's yum on how they decide to internalize things for themselves.
Yeah. My internalization would have just been a cupcake, but that's me. What about you, Aaron? If you got cut a 7th time, like how would you handle it? I mean, you could go the beer route, you could go the cupcake route, you could you wouldn't want to take the Twitter because we already talked about that pre-show and we know that doesn't go well. So what would you want to do after that 7th cut?
Yeah, I'm in a similar mind as Tori because Atlanta is a hub for Delta. So I'm sure Ben DiNucci has been through the Atlanta airport many, many times. The Falcons were his 3rd team in the last calendar year. And for most of those teams, he didn't last more than a week. So he's probably been flying in and out of Atlanta to get to his new destination or go back home, wherever he winds up living. He's been around the block. He started his college football career at Pittsburgh, lost a competition, transferred to JMU. So he's used to this sort of thing. So I imagine Ben DiNucci, similar to what Tori said, like, he has a specific spot in the Atlanta airport where he's like, this is the place I go to have my, not sad beer, but like the beer that I have when I know that, maybe the job interview that I just went on, the extended job interview I went on didn't quite go the way that it went. And so for me, like, I would love to be able to, go back and deal with, some of the shattered dreams with a cool, crisp, beer in an airport or whatever as I make my way back home or whatever. So I respect Ben DiNucci and his choices there. But yeah, similar to UT, I would probably settle for some other like a tub of ice cream or something like that. That would probably be the way that I would process my emotions dealing with being cut several times. But a beer is, relatively speaking, a lower calorie choice. And so I respect Ben DiNucci for, making smarter choices despite, going through these struggles.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk to Ben. Ben, listen up, man. If you're going to do this, right? I don't know. I mean, this is how you roll. That's cool. I get it. Tori made a great point. This is how you do this thing. That's cool. I wouldn't necessarily do it that way. But if you're going to do this, being that you're in Atlanta, sir,
Yep, I knew this was
I
coming.
need for you to find the wing spot
Yep,
in the airport. And I need you to order a 10-piece hot with lemon pepper sprinkle. You know what I'm saying? Like lemon pepper sprinkle. Make sure they put the hot sauce on there first. And then sprinkle the lemon pepper on there after the fact. And get yourself a nice little blue cheese, you know what I'm saying? Just like the chef on the, the one I'm talking about, Tori, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on, get with me, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then you have that with the beer. Oh, man.
Now
it would have been perfection. You know what I'm saying? I would have been with you, my brother. You know what I'm saying? I would have understood you even more had you done that, because you understand the culture that is Atlanta. It's all about strip clubs, churches, and hot wings. There we go, baby.
Period. So that's what he should have done. On his way from Flowery Branch, he should have gotten off, and that first exit would have been the church house. Because hey, you need somebody to pray for your soul with the pain that you're experiencing. And then the next stop should have been the strip club, because then you need no strip club first, because then you need to go pray and repent. So we're gonna go strip club first, and then we're gonna hit the church and repent and tell the Lord that we're drowning in our sorrows. And then to further drown ourselves, we're going to eat some lemon wings that are drowned in
hot with lemon pepper sprinkle. Come on, T, get it together now. Come on now.
You know I don't eat wings, so that means nothing to me. But okay.
It just killed my little spirit.
Tori's like, what the hell is she talking about?
I'm like, wrap it up. Wrap it
just
up.
murdered me like before the show was over. Like, I'm dead. Like, I can't do nothing now.
Tori, I have a thing against wings. Like, yeah, I am like, when it comes to wings, man.
Like, you're not a bone girl.
Yeah, it's
like
just too much work. No, and that is too much work for that little piece of chicken. Like,
oh boy.
But you eat crawfish?
Nope, I was just about to say that to you.
Okay, like, yeah, I'm about to say that.
Oh, okay. If you are if it's too much work and you're an equal opportunist, like I ain't touching it. If it's gonna involve work, I'm cool with that.
Yep, exactly. Equal opportunity, non-working eater. That's kind of what I like.
There you go.
I'm still there though. Just
there are everydayers for making the Falcon Squad Show your first listen of the day, where we teach you how you should part ways when things don't go your way. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with Aaron and his frequent guest analyst Jarvis as your second listen, and check out some of Tori's great work at AtlantaFalcons.com. We'll see you next time.